Okay, Cowboys Day, Cowboys Day. All right, how do I do this intro without having an aneurysm? You know what? Let's just roll it.
In the eyes of Dallas Cowboy fans, their football team is not very successful. They haven't been to a conference championship game in 30 years. In the eyes of their owner, the Dallas Cowboys are a very successful business. The Cowboys are the most valuable franchise in the NFL, valued at over $12 billion, yes, with a B, dollars. This is the Faustian bargain of being a Cowboys fan. You will always have an entertaining team with lots of storylines, a well-maintained stadium that focuses on your experience as a customer, and big names at premium positions. However, when you get down to making the decisions that make a football team good and can propel it to the top of the NFL, the people at the top of those decision charts are going to be weighing those decisions on a very different scale than you do. Overall value of the franchise and revenue are the driver. Winning is nice, but obviously not necessary because that value keeps going up. So you are left with being a fan of a team that doesn't always have your best interests in mind. So that leaves you in fan purgatory if you're a Cowboys fan and you get frustrated and your owner makes money. So is he going to spend that money on a top edge rusher? Who knows, but he's going to stay in the headlines as long as he can.
Buddy, this is not fan purgatory. This is fan hell. Right? And it's been hell for a long time. Because I think hell, honestly, it's not being in the middle. It's being a legitimately good team, right? Like they won 12 games in like 3 straight years. And still not getting any closer to the Super Bowl. Like having 2 teams in your division, bounce off the bottom of the league and then immediately make multiple Super Bowls in the case of the Eagles. And then, make an NFC championship game in their first year in a new regime with a new quarterback in the case of the Commanders. And you're still, just okay as an organization. Like no matter how many games you win, like you feel like you're just capped at maybe we'll make the division round. And that to me is fan hell. Like that sinking feeling going into every season that most Cowboys fans have. Not all Cowboys fans. Some Cowboys fans truly believe this is the year. But I think at this point, most Cowboys fans that have grown up in the 30 years since that dynasty, they know in the back of their mind, like, something is going to hold us back. We don't know what it is because it's a different thing every year, but something is going to hold us back. And unfortunately, each one of those different culprits every single season, the roots of it is the man at the top, right? And it's I want to choose my wording carefully here because it's not that there aren't people in the front office and in the organization and even in the coaching staff that are not very, very, very good at their jobs. Like this is a team that drafts really well. They develop talent really well. Like you don't win 12 games 3 straight years without having a good operation in that way. They have top-notch facilities. The stadium's great. Like players love to be there. Like there's so many good things about this organization. And yet there's just the proverbial anchor that kind of puts a cap on what they're capable of. And I think that's really what's frustrating Cowboys fans is they know that they're not even that far away, right? They know they're not that far away, but it feels far away because of gestures and everything, right? So I guess we could start with the Micah thing because we have to, right? And I'll be honest, like the NFC East being the last division in the series, I thought we were going to have a resolution by now. We're recording this episode, August 17th, 2 days before it goes live. We should have had a resolution to this by August 17th. We started recording like June 30th or whatever it was. Oh no, our first episode went live June 30th. We started recording mid-June, and we're still no closer. Like, it's kind of ridiculous, so we probably should start with it. EJ, I'll give you the floor, but my first impression is, what the hell?
I think what the hell is a very good way to frame it, and you're correct in a football sense. And this is what frustrates fans in a football sense, which is the lens they're using, and rightfully so. That's what they care about. They care about the production on the field. This doesn't make any sense. And there's no way to make it make any sense. You cannot look at this in the way that it's been handled. And quite frankly, it's not just Micah. It's, top stars, when they come up for a contract with the Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys put it off as long as they can. And I saw an estimate the other day, we both saw this, that said the Cowboys have cost themselves roughly $100 million in the last 3 big contract negotiations they've done by putting it off and not doing it early, which we've praised multiple other teams in this series for doing, for getting ahead of that curve. The Bills do it very well. Howie does it very well. But the Cowboys don't do it very well. And fans say, what? And I put out a tweet that said, hey, I really think this is marketing dollars. I think Jerry uses these situations to keep himself and his team at the top of the charts all summer in terms of what people are talking about, keeps the name of the Dallas Cowboys on everybody's lips in a way that he couldn't do in really any other way. This is his hook to keep people, buying tickets and being outraged and saying their name. And people say, yeah, but that doesn't, the salary cap doesn't move. Jerry's not particularly concerned with the salary cap because the salary cap is measured in millions, and the overall worth of the franchise, which is determined by many things besides the product on the field, revenue shares, other marketing deals, total cut of the TV deal, is measured in billions. And if you look at the difference between millions and billions, this makes sense. And that's really the only way that it makes sense. There's a lot of people that said, oh, Cowboys don't make any sense unless you look at them as a reality show and not a football team. I think that's extreme.
Even Jerry says that that's what they are, that they're an entertainment product.
And they are an entertainment product. And you and I know that because we've been to the stadium. And the stadium is not the newest. It is not necessarily the most well-appointed. However, it is one of the best kept. It is one of the cleanest. It is one of the ones that has the best amenities focused on fans. It clearly has a focus on the entertainment pregame, which sounds like a weird thing, but a lot of stadiums you go to, that's not really a thing at all. They just kind of play the anthem and the game starts. Not in Jerry World, not at AT&T. The fan experience is and has been sort of paramount for Jerry. So he is looking out for you, but he's not looking out for you in the way that you want him to, which is get it done, put the very best product on the field, and win sort of at all costs. And that's not the focus because, again, if he's cost himself $100 million in Dak and CD and Micah bucks, but the overall value of his franchise has gone up just over $3 billion with a B, he is still up, if we're talking in gambling terms, $2.98 billion, because the difference between $1 million and $1 billion is roughly $1 billion.
That's a good way of putting it.
I mean, you're talking about, 1 million seconds is 11 and a half days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years and 8 months. So people just don't understand the difference between M and B.
And how many other franchises could legitimately steal airtime from the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles leading up to week 1 just with a contract dispute with a single defensive player? Pretty much only the Cowboys can do that. The story into that game, and it should be can the Eagles defend their title? Here's all the different roster moves they've made. Here's how the team looks different. Here's how the team looks the same. And we're going to be doing that later in the week when we get to the Eagles episode. But as far as the national media, the main thing people are talking about leading up to that game is not the Eagles. And they're dropping a banner. It's the Cowboys, and if they're going to get this Micah deal done. And I don't want to be so cynical where I think that that's the only reason this is dragging out is because Jerry wants to steal the spotlight from a division rival when they're dropping a banner. Sorry, as I remove my cat from my desk while shooting. I don't want to be so cynical to say that's the reason, but I can't think of another one. Like you have a top flight premium position player that's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback. No matter when he signed, he was always going to be the highest paid non-quarterback. And he's in his prime. He's young. He loves playing in Dallas. He loves the franchise. Like, and yeah, there's some stuff that I assume got leaked by the organization about, I wouldn't even say off the field stuff, but as far as like, the podcast and his commitment to practice and all that kind of, like, I get it. But also at the same time, like I've heard stories from pros that were around Bruce Smith where like he would just kind of like chill in meetings and he'd kind of stand off to the side of practice and he's like, he's not really going hard. And it's like, wait till Sunday. And then Bruce Smith would go like and drives all by himself. You have that kind of player, Micah Parsons. Like some guys, like I don't care if they practice that hard when they go and they do what they do on Sundays. So there's no football reason to not get this done. There's really not. And even cap wise, like if you look at the next 2 years of the Cowboys salary cap, like could it be better? Sure. But they're not going to be in trouble by signing Micah. There's no football reason. There's no cap reason why you don't do this deal. It is purely a public, not even public relations. What's the word? It's a media. Barker. Yeah, it's a media domination reason.
Yep.
It's the only thing that makes sense to me. And if that's not the reason, then truly like we're in totally different territory. That's when you get really concerned. But I truly feel for Cowboys fans because this is what, like the third offseason in a row that they've had to go through some variation of this storyline of like, hey, we drafted this really sick player and we're not extending him. Like it's ridiculous.
And that's the biggest tag, that it is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. This is not a one-off. This keeps happening and people keep throwing their hands up and wringing their hands and saying, why? That's the reason why. That's literally the reason why, is to keep people engaged and keep people wringing their hands, because it doesn't make sense and they keep doing it over and over and over again.
Watch, he's going to somehow get signed in the 48 hours between recording this.
100%. The curse works both ways.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get into the rest of the episode now that we kind of got that out of the way, so to speak. We'll go through our 2024 recap and then get into 2025. Obviously, a lot has carried over from season to season, even with a sort of kind of new regime. There's been some internal promotions, some external additions. A lot of guys come back from injury. The more things change, the more they stay the same in this city. So, EJ, take it away with the 2024 recap, and then we'll get into everything else.
Strange. There's a lot of familiarity with this team for me, which is odd because not really a Cowboys fan, but it, in a way, feels like the Jets, which we called Lions East. This feels a little bit, at least on the defensive side, like Bears South, and we'll talk about all the reasons for that. But overall record in the division last year, 7-10. That put them third. They were 2-7 at home, 5-3 on the road, and 2-3 over the last 5 games. And then, for all the Dallas Cowboy fans that would argue that this is a really good football team, we'll talk about the effectiveness summary and the power score and say, the way we rank whether a team is good at football is, can they run the ball? Can they pass the ball? Can they stop the run and the pass? Do they score a lot of points and keep the opposition from scoring a lot of points against them? We just assign their league ranks. We use EPA for all the run and pass stuff. Passing offense, 29th. Not very good. Rushing offense, pretty close, 26th. Pass defense, a lone bright spot. Again, secondary was very good. And you got Micah Parsons. So they're 14th, right in the middle of the league. Rush defense, 31st. You don't have to be great at rush defense to win in the NFL. We see teams go to conference championships and even Super Bowls with mid-ranked rush defenses. Being 31st will put you near the bottom of the league overall. Points scored, 21st. Points allowed, 31st, second worst scoring defense in the NFL. If you add all those ranks up and divide by 6th, they had a 27th overall power score. And honestly, I was surprised it wasn't lower.
I do want to, obviously address the elephant in the room with a lot of this. Yes, Dak got hurt after 8 weeks. They've dealt with injuries all over the place. They have a bunch of guys coming back from major injuries this year, like Diggs is coming back from injury. Guyton got banged up in camp. Dak got hurt last season. like this was just they just were not healthy, and that contributed to a lot of their woes. But that also, is another point of concern for me, is that this team is not very deep. And if you're looking at their starting 22, even after the additions they've made this offseason, if you're looking at their starting 22, it's good. Like this should be a good team on paper if everyone stays healthy. But when is the last time the Cowboys stayed healthy, right? And this team, more than most, I feel like their range of outcomes swings wildly the second they lose like two guys, right? And I think while this team does draft very well, you're starting to see some of the roster attrition over the years that has come with them waiting till the last minute to do deals and not signing guys early. And like you're starting to see them thin out, not even starting, like they have thinned out compared to where they were 2-3 years ago. And that is the cost of basically that marketing spend, to your point, right? Like if you look at Buffalo, when they're doing all these deals 3 years in, they're getting discount on guys. Like they probably, we talked about it in the Bills episode, they probably opened up about 30 million in AAV available by doing all their deals early. And that's allowed them to maintain roster depth. So even if they don't have some of the top end star power outside of Josh Allen, like they're a very deep roster relative to Dallas, who has star power, but not a whole lot behind it. And that's kind of been their Achilles heel. Knock on wood that nobody actually tears their Achilles this year, but they can't sustain through the grind of a 17 game regular season and then getting into the playoffs. Like, that's half their problem, is they just fall apart by November, like as soon as one guy goes down. And I think that's reflected in both their offensive and defensive EPA numbers. So, the key for them is obviously keep drafting as well as they have, but like they got to start signing guys earlier so they can retain their depth. Because without it, not to go on another Micah tangent, but like Jerry said, like, oh, what if I pay him 40 something million dollars and then he gets hurt? Like that just happened with Dak. It's like, yeah, that is a risk. But if you wait a long time and you could have signed him at 35, now he's going to be like 42 to 45. All of a sudden you're costing yourselves another $10 million a year that you could have used to sign another edge that you could have given work to if Micah goes down. So it's like you're worried about your top end stars getting injured after you pay them, but you're waiting so long to pay them that you don't have the depth to sustain when those stars get injured. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling negative prophecy. I didn't want to get into this tangent again, but like this is why Jerry is the anchor for this team. It's just not smart team building, and that's reflected in every advanced stat we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and you have to do all the things to get to the top of the NFL. You can't do one thing well, draft, and then be bad in free agency and bad in player development and make it. You need to draft well, fairly well. You need to be good at player development, and you need to be smart in free agency with your dollars. You need to do all those things to compete at the top of the league. And it becomes almost a crutch when you're really good at one of those things for multiple years. You just kind of get used to it. You're like, well, that's okay. We don't need to pay this guy. We're going to develop some 5th round corner, and he's going to be a starter. He's going to be a Pro Bowler. We're going to be fine. That's not normal. It does happen, and you are lucky when it does. But if you start basing your strategy on those results, on those outcomes, your process goes to hell, and you can't keep up with teams that are doing all three things fairly well, or at least two of the three. And I feel like the Cowboys, to a sense, whether or not they would say that up front to anybody, they kind of have it in the back of their head, oh, we'll just fill this up with like late round rookies that we develop because we develop really well. It doesn't work that way. And the end result is what you were talking about. The roster thins out over time.
It's really showed up in their trench play, especially when looking at them running the ball and stopping the run. If you're looking at average yards before contact, which is a stat that we use for evaluating O-line and D-line play in the run game, And these are all found in our companion infographic. If you're new to this series, we do companion infographics for every single team. They're usually like 18, 19 pages. They have a whole bunch of advanced stats in there. We have passing maps. We have cap space allocations by positions. Like we break down coverage usages, run concept usages by down and distance and formation and everything, right? And one of the pages that we have is trench efficiency, which has average yards before contact generated and average yards before contact per attempt allowed. If we're looking at average yards before contact generated, they were 26th. So their offensive line was not really good at opening holes immediately on the line of scrimmage, and letting these running backs get heads of steam. Not that they had a great running back room, period, but they were not done any favors by this offensive line. And it was even worse on the defensive side. Average yards before contact per attempt allowed was 1.7, meaning running backs weren't getting touched until they were almost 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. That was 30th in the NFL. And, unfortunately, the Mozzie Smith pick has not turned into what we had hoped when he got drafted. And that's partially the Cowboys' fault for, trying to make him a 3 technique and then saying, oh, wait, no, actually, we're going to make him a nose. And those are 2 very different roles, obviously. And like Osa Odighizuwa, I think, is a really good player, but he can't do it by himself. They've sustained injuries at linebacker. Like the DeMarvion Overshown injury has absolutely killed them because he's a really good player. He's easily their best linebacker, but he's still coming off another injury himself. So like they just, going back to the theme of not being able to sustain through injuries, it's like you can't just have Osa against the world when it comes to run defense. And they've been really, really thin on the defensive line. I'm really curious to see if Jay Toya can kind of rescue this situation a little bit, because if he doesn't come along and if Mozzie doesn't turn into what they drafted him to be, we might be in for another year of whatever the hell that was. And if you're in a division with the Eagles and the Commanders, we think are going to run the ball really well, and the Giants, they got Tyrone Tracy and Cam Scatterbo, which are really hard to tackle. Like if you're in a division with all 3 of those teams and you're that bad in the trenches again, like it could be a long year.
I think it might be, and that's already sort of playing out in the preseason. And you mentioned Jay Toya, and I was going to save this for when we talk about the draft, but I'll talk about it now because we have the opening. Jay Toya might end up playing a lot for this team, and I think if you're a Cowboys fan, that probably scares you. But if we look at what Matt Eberflus did in Chicago and how his defense worked, and when it didn't work, it worked really well when Andrew Billings was in there. And Andrew Billings was the post in the middle of the defensive line that was not going to give you a ton of pass rush, but was also very, very sound against the run. And you could count on him to hold up kind of no matter which front you were running. And when he got hurt, the efficiency against the run declined pretty drastically. And they rotated a bunch of players through, tried to play guys, I would say, somewhat out of position, much like the Cowboys have done. And, Mozzie not working in the middle of that defense in the way that they envisioned. And again, they've switched that. This isn't all Mozzie's fault. Some of it's the organization not understanding from probably the earliest moments of his tenure as a Cowboy. We need him to do this and we want him to develop this way. Whenever you're switching that around with a young player, it's difficult, but he is still not getting it done in this particular way, which is largely what he was drafted for. And Toya is not going to give you pass rush. Right now, he's a little bit inconsistent on the effort, but you will see very high effort plays against the run where he is immovable, and that is why they drafted him. And because of that, I can very easily see Matt Eberflus leaning on Jay Toya and saying he's the guy that is the post in the middle of this defense that makes sure that we don't cave in the middle, and we're going to work around that. And it'll be fascinating to see, especially since Mozzie was a fairly high pick, whether or not there's any influence on, well, that guy has to be on the field, or whether he moves to a different role. And who knows? It could be Perion Winfrey. And I think, again, if you're a Cowboys fan at that point, you're like, Perion Winfrey is our nose, because, again, that was not his role coming out of college. But of the 3, he might have been the best in the preseason. So still looking for answers this close to the season. Wouldn't give me a lot of, I wouldn't be very sure as a Cowboys fan about how we were going to turn around the thing that really sunk our defense last year.
And then offensive line, obviously also still a pretty big issue. Like they could pass protect when everybody's healthy. Guyton again got banged up. He's going to miss all of camp and all the preseason. Thankfully, it wasn't a major injury. He's not out for the year. But as far as running the ball, like they did not generate a whole lot of movement in the run game, which is why they drafted Tyler Booker to try to fix that. But they are shockingly thin at offensive line, at least at tackle, right? If Guyton goes down, or rather if Guyton doesn't come back quickly, like if he's not ready for week 1, they're playing against Philly with a starting tackle tandem of, I'm assuming it's going to be Hakeem Adeniji and Terrence Steele. And Terrence Steele, he kind of peaked about 3 years ago, and he's just been declining ever since then. Like Terrence Steele is not the answer at right tackle. It's just they couldn't fix everything at once, so he's still there. But that's not a tackle tandem I want rolling into Philly. The interior, I think, is strong, right? Tyler Smith, he's dealing with knee tendonitis. Speaking of another guy who's banged up. But when Tyler Smith is right, like he's an incredible guard, like Cooper Beebe. And then you got the other Tyler Booker. It's just a offensive line full of Tylers. It's like 80% Tylers on this offensive line. And then you got Brock Hoffman, who could play either center or guard. Like the interior is strong here. The tackles are razor thin. And so I worry about their offensive line. I worry about their defensive line. I worry about receiver depth because you got CD and you got Pickens. So again, we're good at the top. And then after that, it's like, I guess Jalen Tolbert, right? But if one of those guys goes down, we're right back to the issue that they had last year where they didn't have a true number 2. Like they don't really have a great number 3. Like maybe they can get something out of Jonathan Mingo. Like Kevonta Turpin is really more of a returner.
Mingo just hurt his PCL
yesterday. Dude.
I
see what I mean?
I'm not laughing. I know I'm not laughing at Mingo's injury. I like Jonathan Mingo as a player, and I don't wish injury on any player. But
this team can't stay healthy, like ever.
Literally dropped, last night, and then, more came out this morning that he's got further tests, and they're not sure, but he is likely going to miss a little bit of time. Not the season necessarily, but he is going to miss some time with an injury. And again, as a Cowboys fan, you're thinking, oh, well, they brought in Jonathan Mingo, and he had a lot of potential, and, maybe our coaches will turn him around. And, he was playing all right through the preseason, but he got dinged up. Now he's going to miss a little bit of time. And to your point, at premium positions like tackle, one injury away, and we say this every summer about a lot of teams, not just the Cowboys, especially on the offensive line. It's kind of one of the biggest reasons against expanding teams in the NFL ever, is because it's tough to field 32 good offensive lines, even at the top level, forget depth. When you have that situation, there are depth charts as we go through this series that make us very nervous, where we go, yeah, looks great week 1, but week 12, week 17 for sure, is it going to look like that? And the answer is almost certainly no, because it's a long season. There's a lot of attrition, and you are very quickly into players that you're counting on that you just kind of didn't look at them through August and we're like, we'll just pretend that they don't. And now they're starting, and you're going against one of the best pass rushes in the league, and you're like, well, that's not ideal. And that's what happens when you don't have true roster depth.
Yeah, we use the term depth chart loosely with the Cowboys. One area that I think is really fun to talk about is their secondary. Again, assuming everybody's healthy, assuming they come back and they're ready for week 1. Because this corner group is easily the biggest in the NFL. Like if you're just looking from top to bottom, like their top 4 corners to me, as far as talent level, skill set, everything, it's Trayvon Diggs, it's Deron Bland, Israel Mukuamu. I think is going to be their starting nickel. Like he's had a really, really good summer. He's going to be in like that kind of big nickel mold that's becoming in vogue ever since Kyle Hamilton worked out in Baltimore, and everybody's like, oh, I want one of those. But Israel Mukuamu, I believe, is going to be their starting nickel. And then you got Savone Revel, who's a huge corner they just drafted, also coming off a torn ACL. It's the theme of the day. But like they just got size everywhere in this secondary. And I'm really intrigued with how Matt Eberflus is going to deploy them, right? Because, especially in the Dan Quinn era, and even last year, this was a fairly man-heavy defense. They were about 12th in man coverage rate overall last year, at 24.4%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but most teams are heavy zone. 24.4% is actually a lot of man coverage by NFL standards. And because they have so much size in the secondary, they've always kind of leaned into that size and just manned you up and beat you up. Matt Eberflus is coming into town, and Chicago, who also had a secondary that was very capable of manning you up last year. Like, he had that with the Bears, and he still was 6th highest in zone rate in Chicago, even with the DB talent that he had. They were 2nd in cover 3 usage. They were top 2 or top 3 in cover 3 on early downs, and they were 5th in cover 2 on late downs. So he is very much, these kind of mid 2000s Tampa 2 archetype of coach, where we're going to play cover 3 on early downs. We're not going to blitz a whole lot. We're just going to be really sound against the run. We're going to get you into 3rd and 7. Then we're going to call cover 2, rally, tackle, get off the field. I think they can make that work with these DBs because they also have a bunch of range and they can contest passes and everything like that. Mukuamu, by the way, I think is going to be like the key to it all working because he's just so big. He can get into these windows underneath as their nickel and just cause a lot of havoc. But I'm really intrigued with how it's going to work overall because of the trench issues we hit on, where if they don't get this Micah deal done and Micah's not playing, you kind of need a 4-man rush that can win with 4 to make this work. Or else you're just going to have a bunch of DBs that are covering for like 3 to 4 seconds and giving up easy completions because the quarterback's never on the ground. So I am profoundly worried about how this is all going to work if they don't have their best player on the field. Because again, I love Osa and I love their young rookie Donovan Izaraku. And, I had high hopes for Marshawn Nealon when they picked him. If you don't got Micah out there, and you're not a blitz heavy team and you just have to play cover 3 or just have to play cover 2 and win with 4, it's going to be the Bears defense pre-Montez trade, which was not good. Even with the talent they had, it was not good. You need Micah out there. So again, there's a lot of this episode that's a very similar theme of like, it could work or it could be a disaster. And I don't think it's going to be anything in between.
When you say it might not work, we actually have numbers to say, no, it won't work. So last year, Cowboys defensive EPA per play ranking, weeks 5 to 9, no Micah Parsons, 31st. Weeks 10 to 18 with Micah Parsons, 14th. So bottom of the league or middle of the league, 1 player difference. And that 1 player is Micah Parsons. This is the ultimate Jimmy's and Joe's argument. And you talked about the other things that have been possibly leaked by the team. We don't know. We're not in that locker room about him being a distraction and him not being focused and whatever else. The bottom line is when Micah Parsons is on the field, it makes a tremendous difference. By the way, you were incredibly charitable saying that Bruce Smith wasn't focused because if you sleep through defensive meetings, you are definitely not focused.
But when you're Bruce Smith, it okay.
Doesn't matter. And they turned him loose in the same way. And it's the same way that if we're staying within this division that, Parcells treated Lawrence Taylor. People would say, Lawrence Taylor, he's out partying. He's not focused. And he's like, well, yeah, but can you do what Lawrence Taylor does when he hits the field? And their answer was, no, nobody can. And I was like, well, there you go. Like, as long as we can keep him between the lines, he is a positive for our team. And with Micah, it's not like that. There's not as much stuff off the field, but people are saying, oh, he's a distraction and whatever. I'm like, yeah, he's a distraction to opposing offenses who are like, holy shit, we can't stop that guy. So you do need him on the field for this defense to work. And to the point of Matt Eberflus, people always wonder when a new coach comes in, like, what kind of coach is he? And Matt Eberflus, again, having watched him as the head coach of the Bears and even as the defensive coordinator of the Colts, is not a particularly adaptable coach on defense. He is this is our system and we will find players that work in our system. And if you're not one of those players, you won't play for us a lot, as opposed to coaches who come in either on the offensive or defensive side and say, hey, what do I have here? What are my greatest strengths? How can I mold what I do to work with that? Eberflus strikes me as, again, everybody's on a spectrum here, but in terms of which way he leans, he definitely leans towards this is the way we do things, and this is the role I need you to play within that, not, hey, I have a couple of unicorns here. How can I leverage them to the greatest effect?
He runs what he runs, right?
Yes,
and
he does.
I think he's very much a structure over personnel type of coach. He believes in the structure.
Excellent way to say that.
And it's mainly because he does the same thing everywhere he goes, right? He's kind of like Gus Bradley in that way. Although, like, you think Eberflus runs a lot of cover three, like Gus runs a lot of cover three. But these kind of coaches are like, I run what I run because I believe in what I run, and I'm going to teach my guys to do it. And sometimes they overestimate their ability to teach their guys to do what they want them to do, and rather than just doing what the guys are good at. I think the best coaches are the ones who are like, okay, I don't have any linebackers that can cover past 10 yards. I'm not going to call anything that makes my linebackers cover past 10 yards. Not that I think that's a problem for Dallas. At least it's not a problem for Overshown. Might be a problem for Kenneth Murray. Oh, God, I forgot about Kenneth Murray.
We made it to 40 minutes before you had to have your Kenneth Murray episode.
Well, they got Jack Sanborn, EJ. How about that? I'll focus on
Jack
Sanborn.
We're going to talk about Jack because he is a linchpin. I think a lot of Cowboys don't think about this. And again, we're going to talk about that in the free agency piece. But since we're talking about Eberflus and his guys, Jack Sanborn, although not a high dollar signing and not projected as a starter right now, is a very important piece for this defense because he is the lone addition to this defense from the Bears, from where Eberflus was, if you're not counting the coaching staff, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is all from the Bears. As a player, he is that representative that can come in and say, this is what Matt wants in this defense. He played very well in it in Chicago. And already through the preseason, he's showing out because, again, he's going to be ahead of his defensive mates in terms of understanding how the defense works and where the coaches want him. So he's looked better in the preseason. And, again, is one injury away from starting. And if he does, you should actually be pretty happy about that because Jack Sanborn, good player, I think underrated, but is that sort of harbinger or messenger on the player side that people can really lean on, his teammates can lean on and say, hey, what is Matt looking for here? What does he really want? How do we work this, especially in the linebacker room? Sanborn, a very smart player, and performed very well in that role in Chicago. So he can continue to do that in Dallas. And I think a lot of people look at that addition and go, yeah, it's a million plus. Like that's not a guy that's going to be a big deal for us. He could be a big deal in several different ways.
Well, why don't we get to the Bears-laden coaching staff here and kind of go through the power structure? Obviously, there's some familiar names at the top, but there's a lot of new names here, and who better to take us through it than somebody who knows them, unfortunately, very well in EJ Snyder.
Well, there's some highlights here and some lowlights, but we'll start right off the top with the GM, as we always do, Jerry Jones. We talked about him a lot at the top of the show, so we probably won't continue that conversation here. Head coach Brian Schottenheimer, who is trying to keep all this together. Brian's in a difficult position because he's got an owner that wants to be very involved, quite honestly, and he is trying to create, again, the best product he can on the field. He doesn't really care about franchise value. That's not his deal. His deal is to make this assemblage of coaches and players perform as well as he possibly can. Does he have the final say? I think Jerry will say he has the final say because that's what owners say, especially ones who are over involved. I'm not so sure that's the case. We talked a little bit earlier about Mazi Smith, and I very much think at some point Matt Eberflus might say, hey, Mazi's not the best guy to be in the middle of my defensive line, and he might want to take him off the field. He might find resistance. He might not. We'll find out, but that puts a coach like Schottenheimer in a tough spot. Offensive coordinator is Clayton Adams. Spent the last 2 years as the Cardinals' offensive line coach, which is pretty cool because we liked a lot of the creative run schemes that the Cardinals came up with. And the 2 years before that as the Colts' tight end coach. So interestingly, had overlap with Eberflus there for 1 year. Matt Eberflus is the new DC. We've talked at length about him already. He's obviously the Bears head coach last season, and he was the Colts defensive coordinator from 18 to 21. And Nick Sorensen is the special teams coach, and he was the 49ers defensive coordinator last year. This is a rehab stint for Nick Sorensen. He was one and done in San Francisco and gets another shot here in Dallas to be in the NFL coaching fraternity, albeit on special teams, not on the defense. Notable coaches on offense. This is an extremely young staff. In fact, it might be the youngest offensive coaching staff when we're talking about assistant coaches. The most experienced coach on the offensive side of the ball is listed as Lunda Wells with 14 years, but the average experience on this side of the ball for the Cowboys is just 5.7 years, which is extremely low for an NFL coaching staff. The one I want to bring up is Ken Dorsey, the offensive pass game specialist. He has 12 years of coaching experience, so he's right after Lunda Wells in terms of seniority on this staff. But there are a lot of coaches here that have like 3 years or 1 year, notably the wide receivers coach, interestingly enough. But Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator in Buffalo before Joe Brady, and they leaned on the pass maybe more than they should have. The run balance that came with Joe Brady when he came to the Bills offense was one of the reasons that they, have risen to prominence and stayed there for the past couple of years, because he found that balance. So maybe Ken's learned his lesson. I hope so, in terms of that run pass balance. Now he is the pass game specialist, which again would be a position you'd want him in because he obviously wanted to throw the ball a lot. So this could be, right coach, right place, right time lineup. And that would be really good for Cowboys fans. On defense and special teams, here's where we become Chicago South. Andre Curtis is the defensive pass game coordinator. He was the Bears safety coach for the last 3 years, and he followed Eberflus to Dallas. Not surprisingly, that's going to be a theme here. Dave Borgonzi is the linebackers coach. I love Dave Borgonzi. I'm a big Dave Borgonzi guy. I think he develops linebackers extremely well. Saw good linebackers play from the Bears while he was there. He was the linebacker coach under Eberflus, but he was also an assistant with Dallas from 2011 to 2013. So this is a bit of a homecoming for him. That was one of his first big stops. I think it will benefit, all the guys we've talked about. Murray, Overshown, definitely Jack Sanborn, already familiar with Borgonzi as his linebackers coach. Again, knows what he wants and played very well under him. So I think that's one of the reasons that Jack chose to sign with Dallas. David Overstreet II, secondary and cornerbacks coach. This is probably, if I had to tab one coach from this defensive staff that eventually will end up being a DC, I would probably say it's David Overstreet. He also followed Eberflus from Indy to Chicago and now to Dallas, so he is firmly attached at the hip with Matt Eberflus. The good news is he helped develop Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. And as a player, interestingly enough, he was a 4-year starter at Missouri as a safety and was first team all Big 12, which, could be faint praise because, past defense in the Big 12, but, good for David Overstreet and is an impressive young coach that a lot of people within the organization are saying the same thing about. This is the bright star. This is the guy that will eventually probably be a DC off this staff. And then Carlos Polk is the assistant special teams coordinator. He is a former Chargers and Cowboys linebacker, notably, but he also followed Eberflus from Chicago, where he had the same role, assistant special teams coach. So, a lot of Chicago influence on this staff. The Chicago defense was pretty darn good under Matt Eberflus for most of his tenure. Obviously, at the end of last year, it fell apart. But for most of his time in Chicago, Chicago's defense was the strong point. So if you're looking for something to hang your hat on, Cowboys fans, it is that, guy can run a defense for the most part and should bring a lot of those rankings up from where they were. Again, it's not super hard when some of them are 31st in the league, but there should be notable improvement on the defensive side here.
So the main task for this staff, or rather for the offensive staff, and I'm looking at Clayton Adams here, and I'm looking at Brian Schottenheimer here, is they need to have a better run game, right? This was not a good run game last year, and yes, that was partially because of injuries, and it was partially also because their running back room just wasn't very good. It's like there were free agent running backs they could have signed. They chose not to. I won't beat that dead horse. Cowboys fans do it enough. But it wasn't a very good running back room. It's still just okay because Javonte Williams is not what he was pre-injury. Like, I think he's fine, but not much more than that. And Miles Sanders is Miles Sanders. He's slightly okay. He's slightly okay. Then you got Jaden Blue, who's A, banged up, and B, has been criticized heavily for practice habits so far as a rookie, which is always a great sign. And then you got Phil Maffa, who I think could be like a Kenneth Gainwell type, maybe. But like, we're not looking at any sort of game breakers here in the running back room. So if they're going to improve the run game, it's going to have to come from two things. A, offensive line staying healthy and kicking ass, particularly the interior trio. And B, Clayton Adams, I think, is going to have to bring over some of the creativity that we saw in Arizona. In Arizona, we have praised their run game for a few years now. We've praised their creativity throughout this entire series. We reference them a lot because they are one of the best, North Star run games, I would say, in the NFL that everybody should be watching and paying attention to. They're very, very counter heavy. They're very pin and pull heavy. I look at what the Cowboys did last year, and it was inside zone, inside zone, inside zone. Like, they were second overall in inside zone. And if we're looking at counter, they were 27th. They only ran counter 1.5% of the time last year per our handy dandy infographic. So, it didn't really get a whole lot of linemen, pulling out and tracking down DBs in space and burying them, or creating these huge seams with, half the offensive line washing guys down, the other half pulling around, like all the crazy shit that we see Arizona do, especially from like 12 and 13 personnel looks. You don't see that in Dallas. It's very much, we're going to line up, typically in shotgun, like they didn't go under center very much, typically in shotgun, and we're going to run inside zone over and over and over again. It's like a worse version of what the Eagles are. Like, the Eagles make it work because they're the Eagles. Imagine being the Eagles run game, but without talent. you have what the Cowboys were last year. So when Clayton's coming over, it's very much about, just injecting some creativity and dynamism into this run game, and trying to get them to at least like average, because the run game in general, beyond the Dak injury, even in Dak's healthy weeks 1 through 8, the run game was kind of the thing that was really, really dragging them down. And if you're looking at just weeks 1 through 8, I pulled a couple stats on this. They were 4th highest in terms of first down pass rate in the NFL because they knew they couldn't run the ball. And it was just straight drop back passes. This was not, hey, we're augmenting it with the screen game. They were still 25th in first down screens. It was, we are dropping back and we are throwing because we have nothing else that we can really, really do, or really do well. And over that time period, they were 14th in scoring drive percentage, which is fine. Like, they were making it work, but they were 23rd in touchdown drive percentage, and they were 4th in field goal drive percentage. So the lack of a consistent run game would cause them to get into field goal range, but they couldn't sustain it, right? They couldn't actually close the deal and punch it in for a score. If they had to get, a short yardage conversion from like the 35-yard line, they couldn't do it. Then they had to bring in Brandon Aubrey to kick a gazillion-yard field goal like he tends to do. And they also, by the way, had the 3rd highest turnover percentage over that time period too, because Dak in 8 starts had 4 of them where he threw 2 interceptions. And that was largely because they put a lot on his plate because they had to. Like, they didn't have any other complementary way to actually move the ball forward. They couldn't run it. So, like, if they fix this run game, the offense, in theory, could be good. But it's a big if here. And I think, once again, it's another thing we're touching on in this episode where it's if. Like, there's a lot of ifs here. And very few of those ifs, I think, are bigger than if they can run the ball.
And to your point, I think they know that. If we look at who they drafted and who they brought in and how they're structuring it, I think they know if they can't run it, the rest of this could fall apart in a very familiar way.
Let's dive into free agency a little bit here, because there's been a lot of roster turnover, which you expect with a largely new coaching staff, even though there was an internal promotion with Shoddy, and still a lot of carryover with the front office. But there is a ton of turnover from year to year here. A lot of veterans that are now calling elsewhere home, or in some cases still haven't even been signed yet. Carl Lawson is gone. He only played about 36% of the snaps last year, but he's no longer in Dallas. Eric Kendricks, no longer in Dallas. Trey Lance is now a Charger. and by the way, has had a really nice summer. Probably going to be QB2 for the Chargers. Chauncey Golston is now a Giant. Jordan Lewis is a Jaguar. Rico Dowdle is a Panther. He's going to be backing up Chuba over there in Carolina. Cooper Rush is a Raven. Brandon Cooks is a Saint once again. And then DeMarcus Lawrence, this one was the contentious one, is now a Seahawk. Got paid nearly $11 million to go up there and be yet another big, strong base end, which they've had multiple of there in Seattle, but they're like, well, Tank is better at it, so we're going to bring him in. Should play a pretty critical role for them. But, there was some words exchanged on DeMarcus Lawrence's way out of Dallas and his criticisms of the franchise. Things about their commitment to winning over commitment to being an entertainment product. And I think a lot of what fans and media have said about Dallas, DeMarcus Lawrence echoed, once he got up to Seattle. And that was both surprising, but also enlightening to see. I'm curious to get Cowboys fans' thoughts in the comments on that one, because it's one thing for us to say it. It's another for a guy who's been there for years and years to say it. I don't know. What was your read on that, Each?
I think there are a lot of words exchanged when you don't get re-signed by a particular team, but I'm with you on Tank Lawrence in terms of he's been there a long time. He's been a fixture. He was a focus for them, even a star player at times in terms of what they paid him and what they expected him to do in their defense. So it does carry a little more weight. This isn't some, third wide receiver or, backup linebacker who's a special teamer saying, oh, Dallas isn't committed in the way that you might expect a team is to winning, or in the way that I expected. It was pretty interesting, but again, he's an outspoken player. He had a fun moment in the preseason game. There's all these sideline interviews in preseason games, and they're typically fluff for the most part. They're, asking very basic questions about, hey, how's the defense going to do? He was being interviewed by Cliff Averill, another defensive stalwart for the Seahawks. And he did something I've never seen a player do in one of those preseason sideline interviews. He just cut it off. He was like, hey, appreciate you, man. And left, even though Cliff clearly had more questions to ask.
He just was like, nah, I'm done. Thanks.
He's like, I'm out. And I was like, that's kind of fascinating. But again, I think he's outspoken. He's being honest from his perspective. In any argument, there are two sides. And I, too, would love to hear from Cowboys fans in the comments about how they felt about those comments on the way out. There's always a little bit of a sting when you're a fan of a team and a star that you've rooted for years, presumably, leaves and says some things that aren't typically flattering. Did you feel like they were true? Did they echo the way you feel? Or were you like, screw them, we didn't need them anyways? Because I imagine there'll be responses on both sides, but I'm interested to see what was the prevailing wisdom there, because, again, I don't have any particular skin in the game, not being a Cowboys fan.
As far as retentions and who they kept in-house, Kavonte Turpin, re-signed. 29 years old and still one of the more dynamic returners in the NFL. That speed is not going anywhere, at least as of right now. Marquise Bell as well, sometimes safety, sometimes linebacker, who's been kind of okay at both at times, but I'm not entirely sure he's a starter at either. So maybe this is really more of a special teams commitment than him actually getting defensive snaps. Brock Hoffman, one of the more critical depth pieces, one of the few actual real good depth pieces this offense has. He can play left guard, right guard, or center for them. Brought him back at $1.1 million. I thought that was a steal, because I think there's a lot of teams, like if he hit the open market, I think he could have got more than that. Jake Ferguson got extended, $12.5 million, turned into a rather solid tight end for them. He's never become like a top 10 tight end in the league, but top 16, you could sell me on that. And then Osa Digizua, $20 million, which, he's consistently been one of their best defensive linemen other than Micah for the past several years. And I thought he deserved that. And $20 million is, let's see, for DT market, that's what, like 65% of the top of the market ish. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember the Chris Jones deal, but that seems pretty fair to me. And then if we're looking at third-party additions, who they brought in from the outside, Kenneth Murray, they traded for some reason. George Pickens, they traded for from the Steelers to finally give themselves a number 2 receiver. Well, not finally. Like, they've had number 2s in the past, but like it was a crying need for them. They didn't address it in the draft because they were attacking other needs first. Still needed to get a number 2. Ended up trading for him after the draft. And, he pairs pretty well with CeeDee Lamb. Joe Milton, they also traded for from the Patriots. And then Robert Jones, they signed from the Dolphins, and Dante Fowler, they picked up from the Commanders, him returning once again to Dallas. And then last 3 notable ones here, Javonte Williams, they grabbed from Denver for only $3 million. Kyer Elam, they signed from Buffalo to ideally be like a corner 4, corner 5 for them. And Jack Sanborn, who we already talked about, picked up at only $1.5 million from Chicago. So, they didn't massively spend, at least from outside the building in free agency. More so, hit the trade block and then, gave some of their in-house players some money.
Yeah, I'm only barely tolerating your Marquise Bell slander.
Is it slander, though? Is it slander?
Bootleg defensive gem, Marquise Bell. Wash your mouth out with soap. No, I appreciate the fair and balanced analysis of Marquise Bell, but will always hold him pretty close to my heart as a call really out of the depths of that particular draft, who has become a good NFL player and did get re-signed. Kevontae Turpin, one of my favorite reasons to go to AT&T in the first place was to see lightning in a bottle on the field, because he is that. I would say he's among the very top returners in the NFL because of the juice he has. And then, again, a lot of the other players we talked about, it is interesting that they went to the trade well more than almost any other team in the offseason to try and offset the talent imbalance that we've talked about in Dallas. Not typically an avenue that most teams pursue, but Cowboys did it a couple of times in positions that are important, even if not starters.
And that brings us to the draft. I think going into April, most people did not expect them to attack interior offensive line before everything else they needed. But at the same time, that's kind of been the identity of the Cowboys, is offensive line over everything, right? Like, nobody expected the Tyler Smith pick when that happened. That turned out to be a pretty good one. Then there was Tyler Guyton. Now there's Tyler Booker. You go back to the Zach Martin days, the Tyron Smith days. Just over and over and over again. Who else am I missing? It feels like they've done it in like half of their first rounds in the last 15 years. They take an offensive lineman, but it almost always works, right? And so when that pick came in, like, did I think that Tyler Booker was a first rounder, or at least a 12th overall pick material? No, I didn't have that high of a grade on him, quite honestly. But at the same time, I'm like, well, it's the Cowboys, so it's probably going to work, right? And then, the rest of the draft happened, and they're like, okay, picking up an edge, picking up a high upside corner we like. All right, there's the nose tackle, need that. Got a dynamic running back that might turn into something on day 3, and you kind of stack the whole class together, and you're like, well, this makes sense, and this team drafts well. And they didn't do it. They didn't attack these positions in the order that I thought they would, and they certainly didn't attack receiver like I thought they would. But they stuck true to what the Cowboys do. And generally speaking, what the Cowboys have done in the draft has worked out well for them.
When in doubt, pick an offensive lineman high. It's one of the lowest bust rates in the first round overall. And again, this draft was strange. You've heard us say it multiple times if you follow us by now, that after the first 3 or 4 players, there was a pretty serious drop off. And if you were in the rest of that top half of the first round, outside the first 3 or 4 picks, you just kind of had to do what was best for your team. It might not look that way to the outside. And again, the overall grade might not compare to previous classes, but each draft class is a snapshot within itself. And pick 12 overall, Tyler Booker, the extremely powerful guard out of Alabama. And Tyler Booker is a bear of a man who is wildly powerful. Arms, hands, chest. He can move you. His range, his effective range, is about 5 yards, about 2.5 yards one way, 2.5 yards radius around him in a circle. And if you engage him within that circle, you're done. Like, he is going to hold you to account, and you're not going anywhere, and he will nullify you. If he needs to, he push you out of the way. If he needs to, he will put you on the ground. Like, Tyler Booker is an incredibly powerful individual. The challenge with Book is range. And, that was evident on film at Alabama. And again, they leaned on schemes that put him in good positions. If you want to run a ton of outside zone and you want to run pulls to Tyler Booker's opposite side, he's not going to be your primary player of focus. And when we were on the field at the combine, watching him run reps directly next to people like Jonas Avainea, that became clearly evident. Like,
or Jared Wilson.
moves.
It's like watching Jared Wilson pull and then Tyler Booker, and you're like, oh, this is not the same thing.
Not the same thing. Again, they each have their individual strengths, and Book is that he is a bear in a phone booth, and do not engage him close up, because if you do, you're probably going to lose. So you're going to have to come up with movement to get around him. But playing guard, he's not playing tackle. Playing guard, that's tough to do. A 2.5 yard radius is a lot. That can catch, the defensive tackle in front of him, the one across from him, and probably the tackle, the end if they're slanting inside. Anybody that comes into that range, he's taking out. There was not really any question about that with Book on his tape. It's just the question of, okay, does that limit his effectiveness in schemes that are going to ask him to move? Again, and that's up the field as well. He does not have great speed. He is a heavy-handed, heavy-footed guard that is extremely powerful, and he's good at what he does. He did it multiple times in the SEC, over and over and over again. So there wasn't really any question about it, either the strengths or the weaknesses. It was just, how is he going to fit into a scheme, and how are people going to value that? Again, the Cowboys have a history of going early in the first round offensive line, and that it's working out. Is Tyler Booker going to be a really good guard that plays for the Cowboys for a long time and probably works out? Yeah. Is he ever going to be a guy that you're going to run on sprint outs? I hope not, for his sake, because that's not his strength. He's not going to look the best when he does it. But if he does engage you, he's going to bury you.
What I'm really fascinated to see is whenever like the first Giants Cowboys game is, and I can't remember how early in the year that is. Like, if we get a Dexter Lawrence, Tyler Booker one-on-one, it's going to look like a fucking nature documentary. Like, that's just two very large, very strong humans going at it. Like, he's not going to match up well with like Abdul Carter coming up on a stunt, because Abdul is super bendy and explosive, and I don't know if he can catch him in space. Like, if you drag him out into deep water, he's going to have issues. But if it's just, here's Dex, here's me, let's fight, he's got a shot. Like, he really does have a shot, even against somebody like Dexter Lawrence, because he's just that damn powerful. So I think he's a good player. Again, would I have taken him at number 12? No. But also, it's the Cowboys. Like, I'm just going to trust it. Like, they've made a lot of offensive line picks over the years where I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then it just works. So I'm going to trust it. Plus, like, I'm not saying this is the end all be all, but like when Duke says, yeah, this is going to work, I'm just going to believe him. Like, usually Duke is right about this kind of stuff. And then we got Donovan Ezeraku in round 2, which I was a huge fan of Ezeraku. Where did you land on him?
I really like Donovan Ezeraku. He was in my top 4 edges in this class, and I think fits a need. Again, you're moving on from Tank Lawrence. You need more firepower. It can't just be Micah, and the edge group. You need a young, skilled edge. And Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, really great length, plays with I'm going to say a very well-rounded game. And a lot of times when we say that, it's because they're not good at anything necessarily. He's very good at a lot of things, but is strong against the run, does have multiple pass rush moves that work. Hand usage is consistent and thorough throughout the down, has good speed, again, uses his length well, and was effective against top competition. So I think you start with Book, you go to Ezeraku at 44, and then in round 3 at number 76, you get Savon Revel, who wouldn't have been there in round 3 had he not been injured. The cornerback from East Carolina, you referenced him earlier, very tall, extremely effective, could have been CB1 in this class had he stayed healthy. They get him all the way down in round 3, and then you start to look at the top of this draft and say, okay, Booker at 12, Sure, maybe questionable value, but we're going to say that Cowboys get that right more often than not. Then you go to Ezeraku, who's extremely strong. You get him in the second round. Again, top edge rushing talent in the second round. It's rare. Usually happens in the top half of the second round. If it does, like this pick. And then you basically go for the discount on Savon Revel and say, hey, if he heals up, this is a top man corner in the entire country that we're getting in round 3 because of, and unfortunately for Revel, poorly timed injury.
When it comes to Ezeraku, the combo that I liked with him is naturally lower leverage, which we know that tackles hate, a great first step. And when he times the snap, like I'll go back here first, actually. So there's been a lot of edge rushers we've talked about over the years where I give this profile of like shorter base, longer arms, small target area, the like Justin Houston profile, right? Which I've brought up as like my favorite edge profile. And we've had some guys that had a similar profile to that, but they didn't have the first step that Ezeraku has. Ezeraku packages that not smaller frame, but shorter frame with the longer arms so that he can kind of hit you with that stab coming from a lower point of leverage. And he has such a small target area, but he packages that with a first step that gets him to his landmark and gets him on the tackle's outside half immediately, which is what makes him so difficult to block, right? It's not just the fact that he gives you almost nothing to grab onto as a tackle. It's that he gives you almost nothing and you have to do it immediately. So he's not unique because we've seen this frame and this skill set before, but he is a rare frame plus skill set combination that in the past has been really productive at this level. And especially if you're going up against tackles that are like 6'7", 6'8", which there's plenty of those in the NFL. Hell, there's a bunch of those in the division, right? Like this is the kind of profile that can be tough for them to handle.
For sure. And again, a wide range of skills at a high level. So I love what you said about a rare combination is the body type isn't rare. The skill set, not necessarily rare. When you weld the two of them together, he's one of the best versions we've seen of this type come out in recent years. And I thought he was a really good get for this defense. Now, we skip over round 4. There's no round 4 pick for the Cowboys. They have 2 picks in round 5. The first one, number 149, fascinating player, Jaden Blue, the running back out of Texas, who, much like Kevontae Turpin, is in the wide receiver room, lightning in a bottle, super fast. I didn't think his vision was that great. He's good in the passing game, and he is explosive. This is a similar type of profile to Bashul Tutin. I think Bashul Tutin was a better version of this, or a more well-rounded version of this. Super high highs, but also I think some holes in his game. And round 5, honestly, in this running back class was a little early for the Jaden Blue pick for me, but you could tell what they're going for. We need explosion in the running game. We have guys that we brought in free agency that are going to grind out downs for us and be heavy hitters. Jaden Blue is not that. Jaden Blue is the lightning in the bottle that we're trying to inject into the running back room. And again, it's a choice player they're very familiar with, right? Played in Austin, they're in Dallas. They had eyes on him many times throughout the season, and they thought this was the right call at the right time.
So to expand on your Bashul Tutin point, who, by the way, I agree. I think Blue was a worse version of Tutin. If you're looking for somebody who can kind of bring like dynamism and speed to the position, you can throw it to him down the field. You can call crack toss, and if he just gets one little seam, he's gone. Tutin went at 104 to Jacksonville to add to an already really intriguing running back room. And then within the next 40 picks, in between that and when Blue got picked, Trevor Etienne went to Carolina, who was seen as, one of those types of running, not as good, but one of those types of running backs, right? Like somebody who can catch the ball really well and kind of get him out to the edge. You got Woody Marks, who was one of the best overall receiving running backs in this class. Also brings just a lot of juice on the ground. He went to Houston and is probably going to have a pretty prominent role this year. And then Dylan Sampson went to Cleveland. And Dylan Sampson was like, he was doing receiver workouts at the combine. Like some teams thought he could legitimately be a slot receiver. So all of those guys went off the board. And I think the Cowboys quickly ran out of running backs that are like, oh, we can throw the ball to them. And, you still had, like the Taj Brookses and the Damian Martinez's on the board, but they're like, we need somebody who's, quite frankly, really fast. And they were left with Jaden Blue. So did he go earlier than I thought he would? Yeah. But it just kind of tends to happen. Like when a particular archetype is running low and you got to get one before they're gone, they clearly wanted this archetype. So they're like, oh, screw it. Let's just take him at 149 and see if this works.
It felt like that to me as well. It felt like a reaction pick after that particular run of a type of running back. And the other running backs you mentioned who might be better all-arounders, they were saying, we already have those in our running back room. That would just be doubling up. We need something we don't have. And Jaden Blue's the last one we can get. The second pick they have in round 5, number 152, pick they got from the Cardinals, is Shamar James, the linebacker out of Florida. And Shamar James is an interesting profile, not super tall. He's just over 6 foot, not super heavy, just over 220. Quicker than fast. Not the greatest 40 time, but quick in the short area and quick reactions. As a 5th round linebacker, look, he's going to be starting on special teams, but it's interesting to me because of the staff coming in. Now, I don't know how much, again, Eberflus's staff and guys like Dave Borgonzi really got to sign off on these picks because by the time they were hired, the scouting staff's pretty far down the road on their evaluations. But you have to figure that they had to have some input on those, and they saw something in Shamar James that they wanted in their linebacker room. Again, most likely a guy fighting for special teams. This is, it feels like, oh, it's only the 5th or 6th pick. Yeah, but we're now deep into round 5, and they're trying to, again, build out their room. Not the fastest guy. It's not a height, weight, speed guy necessarily, but they like the way he played in the short area of Florida.
Really instinctive, too. Like, I liked him a lot on tape. I really did. He didn't test that well, but that was one of those where it's like, I feel like on tape he's a better athlete, and maybe he's just a gamer. Maybe he's faster with the pads, or when the pads are on. I don't know, but I liked him on tape. When that pick came in, I was like, ooh, I dig that. I really do.
Round 6, number 204, originally a Lions pick, Johnny Cornelius, the guard out of Oregon. Now, he played a little bit of tackle at Oregon. They have him listed a tackle on the depth chart, so not sure why the draft listing has him as a guard. Maybe they try him there, but I really do think he's more of a right tackle, classic right tackle archetype. Was obviously the lesser of the 2 tackles and got drafted quite a bit after his running mate at Oregon, but still a good player. And I think a solid developmental player that you could develop into more of a, he's just a big frame guy. He's not necessarily the most fluid, not the quickest, but he does have strength and length and is pretty darn good in pass pro. And that is a desired skill set. So is he going to start right away? They better hope not, but could he develop into a solid swing starter? Again, with Dallas's history of development along the offensive line, I don't know. I liked it for the value in the 6th round. I didn't think he'd still be there. Again, there's always a dearth of tackles in the NFL. And I liked Cornelius as a sort of solid developmental player. And this is where you'd pick him. Honestly, you usually have to pick him a little bit earlier. So felt like a good lineup of player talent and value for me.
He's a brawler, right? And, between him and the Tyler Booker pick, and even going back to like Tyler Smith and Cooper Beebe and Hoffman, like they're building just a line of brawlers. But my concern with Cornelius is he's the kind of brawler where if he misses, he's not going to recover. Like he doesn't have the athleticism to recover at all. Like Tyler Smith he's a great athlete. He can recover. Even Booker to a degree in a short area, in that narrow cone, he can recover. If a Johnny misses, like he's kind of toast, which is why he went in the 6th round. But you can kind of see the archetype developing here of like, we just need to be able to fight people and we'll figure out the rest.
Speaking of fighters, perfect segue. Round 7, the first pick, 217, originally a Titans pick. This is Jay Toya, the DT out of UCLA, who we mentioned earlier. He is an absolute stump in the middle. He is a fighter in the short area. He is tough, somewhat inconsistent. Don't ask him to move laterally a lot. Don't ask him to be super agile. That is pivot and, switch to something else, loop around the outside. That's not his game. His game is, to your point, stand up and fight. And he's damn good at it. Like, that's why they drafted him. This is the round, this is the range 5 to 7 where you're going to get these more one-dimensional defensive tackles who are incredibly stout, who are strong, who can hold up against double teams, who can just plug up running lanes. And that is what they do well. It is not a premium in terms of draft capital position. However, it is a very important role on defenses in the NFL. Teams need them. Specifically, Dallas needs him, and Jay Toya is the guy they're going to put in the breach and say, hold the line.
I agree with you. I really do think that he is not the missing piece, but the missing archetype that they haven't had in a while. And they've been chasing it. They really have been chasing it. They just haven't found it. I'm curious to see if we're going to see any, like, let's just say Mozzie, turns around and works out. I'm curious to see if we're going to see any snaps of Mozzie, Toya, and Osa on the field together. Because that kind of moves me. And let's just say Micah signs and he's out there too. If you have Micah as your weak side edge, and then you put Osa as like a 6 technique, because you can, and then you put Mozzie and Toya inside, all of a sudden, we're looking at a half decent defensive line here. Not even half decent, pretty darn good defensive line as far as stopping the run goes. Would they be able to rush the passer? I don't know. But that's, we'll rotate guys in. That's why we drafted Ezeraku, right? But if they get what they want from Mozzie and Toya turns into the type of player that we think he can be, which not even round 3, late day 3 is littered with defensive tackles that can just stop the run and only stop the run, and they play for 10 years. If all of these pieces fit together nicely in the way that we think they can, theme of the day, if this could be a pretty potent run defense, but we'll see.
Yeah, when you're mentioning that lineup, my brain immediately goes to the old Seahawks fronts. And
yeah. With Mebane as a defensive end. Yeah.
Right. Micah as the Leo, right? The Michael Bennett role, the more dynamic side. And then an absolute ass kicker in the middle who they hope is Jay Toya. Mozzie as the guy that you can, and Mozzie and Osa both as guys that you can align for flexibility depending on what front the offense puts up. But basically, yeah, those 3 sort of down guys and then a very dynamic sort of Leo, what they used to call Leo edge. Like I could see that working in several ways for this particular personnel group for the Cowboys. So let's hope that pans out. Cowboys fans should hope that pans out as well. Those defenses were really good against the run and otherwise. Their second pick in round 7, originally a Packers pick, is Phil Maffa, the running back out of Clemson. Now, we talked about him. Maffa, more jack of all trades, came out as a reasonable pass protector, which you're going to have to be to find playing time at the NFL level. I'm not sure where he really fits. Like, he's not as dynamic as some other guys in that role. He's not, Kenneth Gainwell. He's not as stout a pass protector as some of the guys we've talked about at the top that were the great pass protectors in this particular draft class, like Travion Henderson. He's just kind of, and I had this in my notes, he's just kind of good. And I knew some folks that were big Phil Maffa fans, and I was like, what moves you about him? Like, and they were like, well, you can do this and you can do this. I was like, yeah, but like at what level can he do this? And again, he's a good player. This is a 7th round pick. Good football players are a nice bet in the 7th round, but I really wonder where he's going to kind of make his mark outside of special teams, which any player drafted in this round is really going to have to make their mark on. But like to work his way into that running back room, what's Phil Maffa's calling card in the Dallas running back room?
I'll tell you. He is the fan favorite RB3 that gets like 6 carries for 25 yards. And he, gets 4 first downs out of it. He churns. He'll have a couple blocks that show up on, all 22 Twitter every single week. He'll make a couple clutch receptions. He'll score like 4 touchdowns. There's going to be one game that he gets the start because everybody else is hurt. And he gets like 17 carries for 85 yards. And then you're going to see a Maffa Cowboys jersey in about 12 years and go, holy shit, Phil Maffa. And everybody's going to laugh and be like, I loved him. He's like the Alfred Blue for Texans fans, where it's like everybody loved Alfred Blue. But like, was he ever like really a starting running back? No, but he's Alfred Blue. He's fun. He's good.
We like it. That is the role, I believe. Their final pick in round 7, number 247, originally belonged to the Chiefs. Tommy Akingbasote, the defensive tackle from Maryland. This is Jordan Phillips' running mate from the Terps. I would say a lesser version of both Jay Toya and Jordan Phillips, which is why he was available in the 7th. And again, a player they're hoping can add to the depth. But this is a developmental player. This is maybe practice squatter if it works out. But again, 247, ultimate lottery pick in the draft. If it works out, if they get anything out of Tommy at all, it's got to be considered a win.
Yeah, I would say practice squad. I don't think he's going to make the 53, but he will make the practice squad. As far as notable UDFAs, really only one to write home about. Wow, Brett, sound it out. Elijah Clark. Jesus. It's that kind of podcast. Elijah Clark, the safety from Syracuse. I can speak English. EJ, I know you're a Q's fan at heart, so I'll let you take this one.
And an Elijah Clark fan, not just a fan of the helmet here. I like the skill set. He reminded me of some of the more versatile safeties, the more well-rounded safeties where, yes, you can play him down near the line. It's not necessarily his strength. He's not that agent of chaos type, but anywhere from the medium to deeper distances, I thought he was very steady. And while that sounds like faint praise or a reason that he was a UDFA, you like good, steady, well-rounded safeties. That is part of the job description. You don't want them getting beat badly. You want them being assignment sound. And Elijah Clark is that. He's got physical skills. He's not super small. He's not super slow. I liked his role in the Syracuse defense and how he played it. To be honest, I'm really surprised he didn't get drafted. I had a 5th round grade on him. He was a draftable prospect. Anywhere after the 5th round, I thought the window opened up for Elijah Clark. I thought there were other players that he was very similar to in this draft that got drafted in that round and even a little bit earlier in some cases. So not sure what I don't know about Elijah Clark, but what I do know from the tape grade is it's a very good get as a UDFA.
That brings us to our final segment of the day. And you guys know it well by now, especially if you've watched every single episode. We have our 3 questions that we answer at the end of each show, which is what was their identity before? What do they want their identity to be now? And what is the goal for this season? Their identity before, honestly, they were thin and soft. 2 things you don't want to be in the NFL. They did not have the depth to sustain through injuries, and I know that some of those injuries were to irreplaceable pieces, like a starting quarterback that makes $60 million a year. So, there was no way you're going to replace Dak. I get it, but they lost a bunch of other stuff too. They didn't have the depth to sustain, and quite frankly, they were soft on the line of scrimmage. And that was something that showed up in the last few years in Dallas was softness. They could not compete with the ultra physical teams that just beat them up in the line of scrimmage. So what do they want their identity to be now? You look at the investment that they've made with Tyler Booker, bringing in Jay Toya, Ezeraku, you getting Sam Williams back. I'm assuming they're going to pay Micah. They want to be tougher on the offensive and defensive lines. They just want to be tougher. And I don't know what Brian Schottenheimer honestly is going to be like a head coach. I don't know if he's going to manage the game better than Mike McCarthy. I have no clue. But I would say from a personnel perspective, they clearly understand that they were the Dolphins of the NFC. And they don't want to be the Dolphins of the NFC. Just like the Dolphins didn't want to be the Dolphins of the AFC. They got tougher this offseason. They've invested in the trenches over and over and over again. Both of these teams, at the same time, have been trying to improve their ability to contend with the biggest, strongest, meanest teams in their conferences. So that brings us to the goal, right? What is the goal for this season? They're not winning the division. They're probably not even going to be second in the division. That is likely going to be Washington. Might even be the Giants if this defense is as good as we think it can be. And if they run the ball well, and if Jackson Dart turns into, a good rookie quarterback, because I don't think Russ is going to start the entire year. So, the Cowboys, it's there's a realistic scenario where they're the 4th place team in the NFC. So I'm not going to say the goal is to win the division. They're just not there yet. For me, the goal is to just sustain. The goal is to stay healthy. The goal is to keep everybody on the field. The goal is to get the Micah contract done. The goal is for Brian Schottenheimer to just manage the game better than Mike McCarthy. The goal is to not completely fall apart, because this team is on the precipice of doing just that. And if they fall apart in the way that they are unfortunately possibly going to fall apart, it will break the franchise. Like at that point, it's like, okay, we paid all this money for CD, we paid for a quarterback, we paid for Micah, and we're winning 5 games. Like that is how you break a fan base. They have tolerated a lot in Dallas. Like they really have. I don't think that they can tolerate that. So the goal is stay healthy. The goal is like, just be competitive and don't fall completely on your face. If they can avoid doing that, I think that they can stabilize the franchise, and they can stabilize the fan base, and then we'll regroup in 2026 and maybe, add more talent in the draft again, and then maybe, kind of get back to what the Cowboys were, which is winning 11, 12, 13 games. But like they cannot break this year, or it will be the kind of break that like echoes from season to season to season. At that point, we're looking at rebuild territory. And I don't want that for them.
For me, the real goal this year is balance, and balance in 2 particular areas that I think will help this team. The first one is run-pass balance on the offense. I don't think exposing Dak as much as they did last year to hits is a good idea for multiple reasons. You covered most of them. And we've talked about the importance of having a solid enough run game that they can lean on it, and that the run-pass balance comes back into focus. If they do that, they're going to be able to control the ball a little bit more. They're going to be able to control the clock a little bit more. And then the second piece of balance is between offense and defense. The defense has to be better. It has to come up through the rankings. Does it have to be a top 10 defense? It does not. I don't think it will be. Can it be a bottom 10 defense? If it is, they're going to have a lot of problems. And again, they're going to have trouble getting the defense off the field. It's going to be too many downs. They're going to be putting too much pressure back on the offense. That complementary football is going to be lost between the 2 halves. So the defense has to come up to midline, and the offense has to balance run and pass so that when they're on the field, hopefully with that supportive defense, they're playing into more of their strengths and not giving the opposition, quite frankly, as many bites at the apple. They don't want to be giving downs up against that defense because, again, that's not complementary football. If they could find those 2 pieces of balance, they're probably going to be their best selves, and the rest will figure itself out. Are they going to be conference champs? Nope, they sure aren't. They are a year at least, maybe 2 away from that, given where the roster is, given where let's just call it a reload is. But if they find those 2 pieces of balance, I think they're going to be a more enjoyable team to watch. I think their fans are going to have less aneurysms overall. And it sets them up with a base that they can build on through the next period of free agency and the draft to say, hey, this is our identity. We have balance between the 2 halves. We have balance within our offense. We can start to compete. If they don't have that balance, they are in danger of breaking the way you're talking about them hopefully not breaking. And that would be disastrous at that point. You don't have a North Star anymore. Nothing's working. It's time to blow it all up. And that's going to be very difficult to do with their contract structure.
Yeah, a reload can become a rebuild very quickly, right? Like they're in a reload right now, but if things go south, they're going to go really, really south. So, and I don't want to see that. I think the league is more interesting when the Cowboys are like watchable. So I don't want to see a bad Cowboys team. I've seen bad Cowboys teams before. It made the season significantly less interesting. So I don't want that. And, obviously Cowboys fans don't want that either. All right, we got 2 more NFC East teams to go. Commanders are tomorrow. Reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles are on Thursday. And then on Friday, we have our patron-only division recap show, roundup show, Friday thing, whatever you want to call it, where we pick our division winner. We pick, offensive and defensive players of the year for the division, MVP for the division, coach of the year, all the season awards, plus our bold predictions for the NFC East. So if you're a patron and you want access to the companion infographic for this team and every other team we've done so far this series, which is 29 other teams so far. You can find that on the Patreon at the link in the description, at the QR code on the screen, and you get access to those Friday recap shows. And also during the season, we're going to have extra content over on the Patreon as well when we're doing our game preview shows. So lots more to come on the Patreon, lots more to come on this channel later this week, and we will see you tomorrow.